Hey, hello, everybody. Today, I would like to share my own board journey. And specifically, what I'd like to establish along the way is why is it critical that more women look at leadership to the board as one of the milestones in their careers? As the founder of an organization, Lead Women, Sundari Berhad, which was set up really to drive for greater gender diversity and greater gender inclusion at the board level. And truly, I know how important it is to have board diversity, having sat on a couple of boards and experienced the rich and diverse conversations when we include that diversity element on the boards. And when I speak of boardroom diversity, I mean more than just, professional experience, more than just industry experience or education. I'm actually talking about real gender, age, different abilities, ethnicities, and many other minority diversities, which brings a real richness of conversation, a real richness of experience and perspectives that organizations benefit, and not just organizations. In fact, it is the entire stakeholder community that benefits through this diversity. Greater boardroom diversity has always, in my view, been such that, it has never gotten the sufficient attention that it should. It has never gotten the importance that it needs to get, because it is really important that we address this underrepresentation with some urgency. And so today, my sharing is going to be focused specifically on the goal of greater boardroom representation for women and why this is a critical topic of conversation. As you know, women's membership on boards has been an issue for a very long time. And if you talk about Malaysia specifically, where we started Lead Women, we've been on this journey since late 2011. And, it has taken multiple stakeholders to support this journey and to support the achievement of some of the aspirational targets that we've had. And together with multiple stakeholders, especially the important ones like the government and the regulators, and other advocacy bodies that have also joined forces to work on this tirelessly, to raise awareness, to develop effective strategies. But we look back and we say, while we've achieved much, we still have a long way to go to get to parity. And it is also important that we start to measure this not just by a number, but in fact by an inside-out mindset, complete shift and change. So I think what I'll do today is to bring some clarity to this. I will share my journey in three parts. The first one, maybe on what got me there to my first board. The second part, we'll look at some collective progress that we have made, which is quite impressive, and we'll share the data and maybe tell a story around the data and what that's looking like. And finally, really look at what needs to continue in order for progress to sustain in the right direction. So if I talk about what got me to my board, to the first board, I think I can outline that in three clear factors. My opportunity to sit on a board came because, one, there was a public declaration by the government in 2011, mid-2011, in Malaysia, I'm talking about, and I think this can apply across the globe, really. So there was a public declaration by the government to say that we want to increase women representation at leadership level and at the boards to 30%. And they set a timeline of 2016. But you can see that that didn't happen, that goal didn't get achieved. And we'll talk about that when we share numbers later as to why and what caused some of the setbacks. But there was a will to drive for this increased representation. So across the nation, there was a lot of excitement by women communities, women leaders, etc., to see that there was going to be this shift of focus. Two, I think what also was a catalyst was the advocacy for gender diverse boards as a strategic business imperative by stakeholders. So it really shifted from a women's issue to a business issue. We began to see organizations, bring out statistics that had very strong correlation between value of having gender diverse boards versus homogeneous boards. And those kind of statistics helped to shape the thinking. It helped to drive a mindset that said, okay, let's take a look at this discomfort that's going to come into our boards, because at that point in time, 90 to 95% were really all male boards that we were seeing at that point in time. So this whole advocacy about let's shift and let's bring diversity, one, there was great discomfort. because it was breaking into zones that were very comfortable the way they were. And it was really quite an elitist group at that point in time. And so that was the other thing that started to kind of shake the marketplace a little bit. And thirdly, I think I was in a leadership position, a senior leadership position. At that point in time, I was the CEO for one of the Global 500 tech companies, Malaysian subsidiary. And in that position, I got a lot of visibility. I got to make networks and build my connections into the circles that linked to boards. And that network was a very powerful network, and being a CEO in a tech industry environment at that point in time was really, one of the very few amongst a very strong male-dominated board, a male-dominated space. So having that opportunity to build visibility there, I think was an incredibly strong catalyst to move me onto a board space. Because if I recollect, it is that network that recommended me to my first board opportunity. So I think these were the three factors, if I recollect: a clear declaration and a will to want to increase women representation, strong advocacy for gender diversity that was going on in the marketplace at that time, and my position in a senior leadership position that opened up the networks and the visibility for me. And I still hold true that I think these will be very key drivers as we go forward as well, amongst many other things. And why is it so important, and why is it so critical, that women get to the board? It is not just about another milestone or a finish line to the leadership, but it goes on beyond that. And I only realized that when I got to the board, having been a senior executive, a leader in the community, Malaysian community, it was a very different experience when I got into the board. It was a whole shift of taking the knowledge I have and making it effective in a boardroom. So board experience can provide some very critical preparation for professionals like us, leaders like us, because it takes you to quite a different level in the way you look at business and you look at the entire ecosystem of the business world. The knowledge I gained from, being engaged in the details of complex governance requirements of the stock exchange, the broader knowledge of market structures and the issues really equipped me for where I am today, and got me to multiple other boards. And today I chair a board of a public listed company based on all the knowledge that I had gained, the learnings that I had taken away as a board director. In fact, I would say, you gain as much as you give back as well in taking that next step onto the boards. And that is why I feel that, it is important for women leaders to continue growing and taking that next milestone onto the boards, because it truly equips you for much greater things to come. And having that exposure, having that privilege of being exposed to all the, the strategy that you see from up there is quite different from when you are operating the business and the strategy that you see from that lens. And at the board level as well, there are many clever people who come and sit on the board, people who have gotten vast experiences, people who have, been involved in large mergers, acquisitions, able to see the next market transitions, drive strategies that grew organizations, twofold, threefold. And you're learning from really, great leaders up there at the board level. If you sit at the right boards, it's important to also make that choice. The inside knowledge on how they operate really helped me to develop a deeper understanding. It gave me more confidence. It brought a lot of my understanding to the board at a very different perspective and level. And so that is why I truly believe that serving on corporate boards is not just an important milestone or a finish milestone, and especially for women, because it is an important stop along your journey. It is an important stop along your leadership journey that will prepare you for more important roles in the future. And hence, we continue to advocate for that, because it is something that you cannot learn from textbooks, but you learn from the experience and the diversity of thought that comes from a board experience. And with this, I'd like to share a little bit of the data that will tell us a story of some of the successes and some of the many more things that we have to do in order to see more parity at the board level. It's stats for Malaysia specifically. So this is the KL Stock Exchange numbers that you're seeing. And, you know, a lot of work that has gone in with all the stakeholders putting their efforts in trying to drive it from increased regulation around this through the government's push for one woman on one board by the end of last year, the 30% being the best practice by and in the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance. I think the collective progress with all these stakeholders, and not forgetting the investors also putting quite a bit of pressure on organizations to drive diversity, and that they would only invest in companies that had diverse boards. So if you can take a look at these stats, you will see that in Malaysia, in the early part of 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, we were stagnating at only about 7% women on boards. The orange stat is very much the 900 over boards listed on the stock exchange in KL. And the blue stat is basically tracking the top 100 companies on Bursa Malaysia. And there was a decision to really look at tracking them independently because the whole globe or the whole world were tracking their largest market cap companies separately and independently. And that was the figure that was being tracked. So when we split it up and we started to track, you can see the progress when there was a will to do it, a public declaration, and there was a lot of regulation behind it to make and force this into being. Through regulation, through the government mandate of one woman on one board, you can see that over time, and a lot of advocacy from companies like Lead Women, from organizations that were advocating for increased gender diversity and inclusion, you can see that the numbers actually were moving in the right direction. And today, you know, proudly at the top 100 companies, we see a 30% number already made this year, although it was an aspiration that we had in 2016 that never got achieved. And let me give you a little bit of a background as to this. So when we started out and we set the target for 2016, we were thinking that in 5 years, we could easily make that number. But we then realized that what was holding us back in getting there were really not about the supply nor the demand, but it was really about the mindset shifts that needed to happen. It was about the ability to break stereotype thinking about gender. It was to break societal and culture norms that prevented women to move their leadership in certain directions. And that actually took us a long time. It was really about shifting the mindsets that has taken us to where we are today. And there is still a lot more work because mindset shifts are never that straightforward nor that easy, and sometimes don't even sustain. So, but proudly the numbers have shown. But if you look again at this number and we break it down to granular detail, while 30% is an average percentage across the top 100 companies, if we actually break it down, you will see that there are far less companies with actually 30% and more. So what this story tells us, or what this data tells us, is that this is an average. But if you go down to individual companies, there is still a lot of work to be done on the ground to keep these numbers up. And one of the most important things is there must be a strong pipeline so that there will be sufficient supply as the demand grows. And on the next slide, we share a little bit about global stats of the senior decision-making positions and where women stand on this. And I think this is the latest, one of the latest stats. It's a 2023 number for March. And you will see that, you know, HR directors, lots of women, CFOs, fairly high in terms of numbers. But as you get to the most strategic leadership positions, and that is the CEOs, the chief marketing officers, the operation officers, and even the women in tech and in the area that's really starting to grow, the whole tech space, the digital transformation space, we see women, you know, significant decrease in the number of women in those decision-making positions. And if we don't get enough women in these roles, then the pipeline is going to be impacted. And what we will find that these numbers may regress instead of progress in the direction that we have taken it. So Lead Women does a lot of work in really building out a strong C-level base of women in all organizations. We drive it through education, through advocacy, through conversations, and through multiple ways, coaching, mentoring, so that these women stay and they progress and they get the visibility they deserve so that their next stop can be a board position. And it is a lot of work, and it is not something that we can take our feet off the accelerator pedal. We got to keep pushing and keep going so that these numbers after a while will become organic and grow within organizations. And on the next slide, some data of a more global representation. Again, the stats are good. It's showing that we are going in the right direction. It shows that we are at the 30% average across the globe, which is great. That is something that has taken a lot of work and effort to go there. And because of things like that, many women are starting to get onto boards. It was because of numbers like that or visibility like that I got my first board position, because people were already talking about how strategic and how important it is. But, after sharing this data with you, you can see that there is still a lot of work to do. And if other women are to come through this path, then we need to do work to sustain it. So the slide that I put up here right now is to actually identify where is it that women have the most difficulty? Where are their biggest challenges for women as they grow up in their careers? I think there are a few points that actually hold women back. And that is at the point of recruitment and hiring. At the point of recruitment and hiring, there are a lot of biases that come through in giving women the right due positions they deserve. And this is something that we have also started a lot of work in, and what we call ethical hiring or sustainable hiring, or taking away the unconscious bias from hiring. We have also seen, and we've discussed with many groups of individuals in this space, that there are a lot of norms that kind of guide the hiring process, and the kind of languaging that goes in hiring women have also got to be, sort of gender sanitized, so that it doesn't really specifically skew the hirer to look more at male profiles rather than female profiles. And of course, this has to be expanded across the greater and bigger diversity of age, of people with disabilities, of ethnicity, etc. The other area where women kind of fall short and get held back is when it comes to promotions. And, when it comes to promotions and transfer and project opportunities, this is another area where there is, again, a lot of bias that gets infused into the decision-making. So the whole idea of ensuring that women are in line for promotion has to be very transparent, has to be bias-free in order to give them an equal opportunity. The other area of discrimination that you see coming through for women is really in their whole career development. While we look at today's organizations, and many of us will say, no, we are very fair with the opportunities and development, and that could be true for the majority of the time. But when it comes to specific roles that are very much, critical roles for promotions, critical roles for visibility, critical roles that will drive them up through the chain, we find that this is where, again, either women are not given the right training, coaching, or mentoring opportunities, or a lot of the time also women cannot spare that time because of other family matters that hold them back. So there is the whole work-life balance, which is real and true, but with the whole idea of flex working coming in and a lot more trust-based type of environments in the workplace, we hope that this will also shift and change over time. The other area that you see also discrimination for women are the benefits and the payments. And we see that, despite, again, everybody says it's equal pay, there is no gender differences in pay, but statistics have shown us otherwise. And this is an area that needs to be revisited. And again, I think unless we do our work thoroughly and very open and without bias, we may not spot some of these areas of discrimination that hold women back. And lastly, of course, when organizations go through redundancy programs, etc., we find that a lot of the time the separation always hits women the hardest. So these are the areas of discrimination. And if you ask me, even in my own career growth, I have faced discrimination in specifically promotions and transfers. You know, these are areas that you find that somehow if there is a role that is very strategic, it is a lot easier to find more men in that capacity with that exposure and experience than you would be able to find women. But of course, you know, as we progress and our leaders are given more and more opportunity to look at a much bigger picture, and the whole diversity, equity, inclusion becomes such a strategic imperative across the organization, I'm quite sure we'll see a little bit, you know, a little lesser of this discrimination at every point of a woman's career. I was also fortunate to be in the right industries where I could make a mark in that gave me these opportunities. And the whole idea is to be able to use these opportunities, use these networks, and maintain these networks. It's a lot of hard work to do that, but it is the very same networks that will really be the ones that take you to the next level and really into the boardroom space. And as I conclude my journey and story on my boardroom journey, I just want to bring back 3 things that will continue to be important for women who are trying to make their space into the board space. And I think I continue to say, and I urge organizations to clearly share what are their diversity targets, where do they want to go, in a way something like a public declaration that was made by the government. So it's important for organizations to also publicly declare their whole diversity strategy. And I think the regulators will continue and have to continue to put you know, regulation in place, monitor and manage that so that we don't take our eyes off the diversity targets. You know, is 30% enough? Should it be 50%? What is parity and how do we get there? Should it even be a number? So the whole idea is that unless there is some kind of a target or aspirational goal, it will become slowly, you know, it may lose its focus in getting there. So I still believe very strongly in we need to publicly announce and declare your initiatives and your targets. And 2, the whole work of advocacy needs to still continue. So, you know, the advocacy from all the groups around us, the work that Lead Women does really enhance, you know, kind of really drives this advocacy, and we do it in multiple ways. And even in a session like this, you know, I feel is part and parcel of advocating for more women in leadership positions and boards. And lastly, of course, you know, we need to really move women up the value chain in their leadership. And for organizations to do this, it is all about, you know, measure, track, monitor, identify problem areas, identify areas of discrimination, and work on it to reduce the biases so that it becomes more and more equitable in the workplace. And for organizations that feel that, you know, they are doing so much, but yet there's an attrition, it is of women, and it's hard to keep the numbers, maybe it's time to revisit and also look at the middle management layer, because usually that's the layer that needs the exposure to what it is that diversity, equity, inclusion can bring to them. A lot of the time, the mindsets there are very short-termism. The mindset there is about today, it's about now, it's about work. And specific work goals that they want to achieve in silo. So I think that's the band that really needs a lot of work, a lot of exposure into what inclusive leadership means. And I think with all that, we have a really good chance to take our numbers up to parity and even beyond for the 2050 target that we are all shooting towards. Thank you very much.